Welcome back. I hope you're having a fantastic day and things are going well for you wherever you are in the world. Today is February the 1st of 2022. We're going to do a quick markets update on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and the stock markets and take a look at what is happening and what we can be on the lookout for in the near term coming up. So the stock market closed up for the third straight day. So we're getting a little bit of a rebound here from those from the Fed lows that we experienced recently. So we will take a look at some of the news driving the stock market here lately. We had a little bit of a bump in earnings from last quarter. A lot of that is inventory buildup. A lot of it is increased pricing. So economists and analysts in the financial world are kind of mixed on their predictions for growth in Q1 and beyond in 2022. A lot of people are lowering their forecasts, saying that a lot of what we saw last quarter of 2021 was inventory buildup that we are not likely to work through moving forward. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. I know Goldman Sachs has lowered their predictions on growth and their expectations of growth going into Q1 2022. And depending on how those prints come out, that will likely have an effect on markets. And so we've got a lot to look forward to coming at the end of Q1. We have the Fed with their decision, and we will have Q1 growth numbers coming out after that. So there are potential landmines out there that we could be facing. Looking for recovery and rebound as we move into, the mid to late term of the year. And with the Fed, what are their choices? What are their options? Well, they could do nothing at the next meeting. They could raise rates by 1/4 point, and they could come out with 1/2 point. That's generally the three outcomes that everybody's looking for. As we get closer, you'll see more and more indications of what it's likely that they're going to do. If they do nothing, well, we might see a rebound in markets moving forward. If they raise 1/4 point, you might see a little bit of dip in markets. If they raise it 1/2 point, you might see a big dip in markets. And then we'll start with a rebound and move on from there. The real question is there a potential recession on the horizon, which is a 20% decline in GDP for 2 consecutive quarters? We'll have to wait and see when we get there. But again, economists, investment banks, analysts are trimming back their growth expectations moving into 2022. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. On the news front, there's a lot of great news and narratives out there that we'll get into in a minute, but let's take a look at the charts real quick. Bitcoin, this is Bitcoin on the daily, and Bitcoin is continuing to plug along here and work its way towards that rebound and retracement that we've been talking about, to that 0.5 to the 618 level, which is going to put it in that 50,000 plus or minus range. We'll just have to wait and see where it ultimately decides to bounce from. If it continues from here, it could. Or if we see a bounce, and we saw some price action today. That's the daily chart in Bitcoin. If you jump down to the hourly, there was a lot of excitement earlier that we might be having a little bit of a pump when we pumped from 3,800 and started testing 39,000, getting close to 40. Then it automatically rejected, and now it's rebounding a little bit. So we're just kind of ranging here. And when you look at this on the 4-hour, you can see a clear pattern of ranging that has been happening with Bitcoin. We kind of go in these sideways patterns, drop, rise, and then drop down. Then we kind of range a little bit, rise, drop down. And we've been kind of repeating that pattern over and over. And that's where I'm expecting one more little drop here and then bounce into that retracement before we tail off into a longer term consolidation and more of a downward market. That's kind of what a little bit of consensus is out there, but there's also consensus that, or not consensus, but opinions that we may just bounce from here in terms of Bitcoin and the crypto markets. If you look at it on the daily, you can still see that we're kind of testing this little range here in that area that we ranged last year in the late spring, early summer, before bouncing into this whole cycle here, this retracement, irregular correction, whatever you want to call that, before the last all-time high. So we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. Looking at the stock market, we're having a nice little rebound here. We've got the Dow, or this is the Dixie here, I'm sorry, it's the Dow Jones. Right now, we've got a nice little bounce on the Dow Jones, which we tend to get every time you get big sell-off. So as long as that continues, we'll see if that can get back to, any of these other recovery levels. Right now, let's see where it bounced if we take a retracement here. So right now we're approaching that 618. So we'll see if it rejects off the 618. We'll have to track that. Or if it clears through. If it clears through, we could be looking for more continued upside. If it rejects, then we're going to be looking for some more downside. The NASDAQ right now is not quite to the 0.5 level, a little bit weaker on the retracement. The S&P has just crossed the 0.5, approaching the 618. So we're at key retracement levels for these indexes, and we'll just have to watch them over the next few days and see how that shakes out. As far as the dollar, when the dollar was up, Bitcoin was down, dollar's down, Bitcoin was up. So we saw a little bit of a dip in the dollar today, and we saw a little bit of a pump into Bitcoin. Got some people excited out there. It's really an emotional market. It's kind of fun to watch. But the key things to watch here are Bitcoin dominance. As Bitcoin dominance rises, the altcoins can suffer a little bit. A lot of the altcoins have been beaten down quite a bit. We'll take a look at a few here. So what we're really looking for is that Bitcoin dominance to continue to rise. Altcoins will kind of bleed out. Then dominance could roll over when the altcoins go on their run. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. Here's the altcoin market here. We talked about yesterday that the altcoins have already reached that 4.236 extension. So has Bitcoin. So by those means and measurements, this market cycle has completed, and we're kind of in that bear market consolidation phase where we're looking for that retracement and then a rolling over into a longer term consolidation. Not necessarily a bear market or a crypto winter, if you will, but more just consolidation, getting ready to fuel the next rally. And that's kind of where we're at, where these extreme lows, depending on, obviously economic conditions, crisis around the world, another pandemic, something like that popping up, another variant popping up, we should be in more of a consistent consolidatory phase and see some of these cycles start to level out a little bit. This is still a young space, young asset. Here is Ethereum, kind of the same thing. A lot of these altcoins and other assets are tracking Bitcoin closely. Bitcoin's been kind of leading the stock market a little bit. So we'll see how that plays out and if that continues to be the case in terms of price action moving forward. Avalanche, a lot of people were asking about Avalanche. Avalanche is kind of bouncing around, a lot of support in this area here. So for Avalanche, looking like it wants to hold up in this, range of $48 to $80 range. I know that's a big range, but that's kind of where it bounced around. But it looks like there's a lot of confluence here in that 59 to 70 range. So Avalanche could easily rebound from here, but it could also, potentially roll over as well. So this is the area here where we're looking for Avalanche to kind of maybe follow the markets, do a bounce, and then go into a retracement. But, Avalanche had set some nice all-time highs recently as well. So we just have to keep an eye on that. Solana has a lot of good use case, a lot of good future. This is the Ethereum competitor, one of the top Ethereum competitors right now. Been on a big run, a lot of fundamentals. But this area here is one that could be tested for Solana once we get that retracement. In Bitcoin, a lot of the alts are going to roll over as well before they go on a final run, if they do go on a final run. And this is in that 65 to 80 range. That's where I first got into Solana, was right around $60, $65. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look, but that's where I entered and wrote it up, and I exited, and I've been kind of playing with these bounces along the way, just buying and selling, 20% here, 15% there on the way down, buying here on these dips. And especially when you go more into the 4 hourlies and the hourlies, you look at an asset like Solana here over the last couple of days, that was a nice 26% bounce. So you can play with some of these time frames. And the key is you got to jump in when it feels like, all bets are off. So right here, I entered right in here, and this was right around that $80 range. It looked like it could just keep going. And when you look at what I just showed you, it looks like it could fall off a cliff all the way back down to 60. You got to be willing to take that bet. And then I exited here, and I think I got about 20, well, this is 22.7% or 27.7%. I got probably 15 to 18% out of that move. And then this one here, I've already exited that. So that was a nice little play here. I've done the same thing with crypto.com on some of these bounces. And again, the entry on these are where you feel like, man, this thing's going to fall off a cliff. And that's where you got to decide, are you willing to take the risk? And then you got to let it play out, because you see, like with crypto.com, we got a nice little, that was about a 15% bounce, I think, right there, or more. So let's take a look at that. 17% bounce, but then it dropped right back down. Then it went on. And ultimately, this ended up being about a 30% move. Matic, same kind of thing, dance around. So a lot of these coins, if you're going to play these ranges and do a little bit of swing trading, you get into them when they've hit that bottom, when they've wicked down low, kind of lost that downside selling momentum. That's where you got to jump into them, and then you got to give them time to play out and get that 20, 30, 40% move. Mana is another one that's had a really big move here lately. I think that one is probably 50% off the lows. Yeah, 60% off the lows. I haven't done anything with Mana. I've been focusing on Solana, crypto.com, and a couple other things, just kind of getting in and out. Again, I feel like there will potentially be a retracement, some more downside, where I'll potentially enter for a more long-term play. And when I say long-term, again, I expect a retracement and then maybe tail off into a longer, more sustained consolidation phase in the market. So that's kind of what I'm looking at on some of these altcoins. Now, where would a more long-term future be, and how do you determine that? So when you're looking at, asset prices and things like that, the question is, what is a fair value for an asset? How do you value Bitcoin? How do you value Ethereum? How do you value Solana? So you have to look at, number one, you have to understand an asset's worth what somebody's willing to pay at any point in time. That's how you value any asset. Real estate, businesses, whatever. Businesses are a multiple of income, and it's ultimately what multiple is somebody willing to pay at any point in time. What's the market, able to bear? And all of that is determined by credit, liquidity, things like that. So those games have changed. The credit markets are changing, liquidity is changing in terms of interest rates, the cost of that capital. So a lot of those things go into the factors that determine multiples on stocks, companies, multiples of earnings, things like that. And then obviously, cryptocurrency prices and what's driven those markets. So when you're looking at valuing an asset in terms of, what is a fair value for an asset, and we go back to these price charts, like Bitcoin, you got to look at where did it come from and when, where did it go to and when, and where are you now in the cycle, and what's the likelihood of it revisiting those areas on the top end or the bottom end, and it's risk reward, right? So right now we're running at 37,000. We know that Bitcoin was at 68, 69,000. We also know that Bitcoin came from after the pandemic lows. Our recent all-time high was about 19,000. We know the worst case scenario was about 3,900, when the pandemic hit. So, and that's been tested a couple of times. We know this all-time high generally holds up in previous cycles. So you have to say, well, our first worst case scenario is probably $19,000, unless there's a big economic event that could take it down into that $3,900 range. So it's not going to zero, and it's not going away. Regulators can't, I'm not going to say can't, but they're not going to outlaw it. It's just too broadly held by institutions, by corporate donors. Politicians aren't going to try to get rid of Bitcoin in and of itself. They will stop it from becoming legal tender and official currency. So in terms of Bitcoin's chances of becoming an actual currency or legal tender in the United States, those chances are pretty slim to none right now in terms of the regulatory environment and the resistance it's going to face from the federal government, just in the sense that it's just not a viable option at this point in time, and the government's creating their own digital currencies. What Bitcoin is becoming is a store of value, establishing itself in that way, and it's recognized as digital property, which is what it needs to be. It's not a currency. I know that's what it was created for, but that's not what it's proving to be, and that's ultimately probably not what the future of it is going to be, at least not for this country. Maybe some other countries might do that, but in the United States, it's going to be a risk asset, store of value, digital property, just like stocks. Stocks are risk assets. Those are digital, essentially. And that's kind of where this is. And that's the resistance in the government in terms of regulation. They're not trying to eliminate the space. They're not trying to regulate it out of existence. They're trying to bring some rules to basically control it, to keep it where they see it belonging in terms of its place as an asset. So it's definitely not going anywhere, not going away. But the question is, where's the real growth, right? So you see Bitcoin, if it hits 100,000, if it hits 500,000, it's got a, maybe a 1x to 2x opportunity in the next few years. Whereas some of these other spaces and some of these other coins might have a 10x opportunity or a 100x opportunity. So where are those opportunities? You have to look at where the capital is flowing. And when you look at what is going on in the space, you have to see where's capital flowing. So there's a VC firm that just raised 500 million in capital. You can look at the stories that all of these different firms that are raising all of the money to go into the different projects, and it's in the NFT space, it's in gaming, it's in DeFi, it's in the metaverse. There's other articles out about Web3. So the other thing is, where are resources going? Where is the capital going? Where are the people going? That's the future of the space, and that's where you're going to see these 10x, 100x opportunities. All of the big FANG stock employees are leaving and going into these companies in the metaverse, in Web3, in DeFi, in NFTs, things like that. There's a story here about 4 ex-Facebook developers are joining forces for Web3. You see Google executives are leaving. And why are they leaving? Because their dreams couldn't be realized at Facebook due to regulatory pressure by the company being unable to adopt cutting-edge technology aggressively. So they're just fed up by the red tape of the big tech firms. So you're going to see a lot more people leaving big tech, going into these spaces. So you want to follow those stories and see where these individuals are going. When top talent from the big 3 and the big 4, so that'd be Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and then you start looking at the other ones, Netflix, companies like that. And then you start looking at other industries like Nike, Coca-Cola, places like that. When you start seeing top talent leaving those companies and going into these spaces, that kind of gives you a hint in terms of what the future of the space is and where the opportunities are going to be for you as an investor to ride that wave. And NFTs are red hot, but NFTs can be tricky. So you need to understand what's going on in the NFT space, where you're safe, where you're not. Gaming, play to earn gaming is a huge space. And that's where a lot of energy and excitement is going. And one of the ways you can track some of these as well is if you go to CoinMarketCap and you want to say, well, how do I invest in those? You can go into some of these and look at them by categories, DeFi, NFT, metaverse. So if you want to look at metaverse plays, there's a lot of excitement in metaverse. You can see Decentraland, Sandbox, Axie Infinity. That's a play to earn game. Axie's got a lot of traction, generating a lot of revenue. Let's go look at Axie right now. So these are the types of things that you want to look at in terms of where are your upside. And right now there's been $3.6 billion traded on the Axie Infinity marketplace. This is an NFT play to earn gaming space. 820,000 of the most expensive Axie ever sold, 820,000, 2,800,000 daily active players. So this is what you want to do. You want to go research these things. And I'm not, obviously saying anything in terms of, whether or not you should buy Axie or anything like that. I'm just saying, this is where you look, to find opportunities that could be a potential 10x. I'm not saying Axie is a potential 10x. I'm just saying that's where you can see some of these potentials when you look at Solana, when you look at Axie, when you look at Decentraland. You want to look at the tokens that are being offered on these spaces and where those opportunities could lie for you to take advantage of. So that's how you find these opportunities. You want to go research the companies, make sure they have real use cases, real users, real income supporting these tokens and supporting these projects and these protocols, whether it's DeFi, whether it's in NFTs, whether it's in play to earn gaming or in the metaverse. And metaverse in and of itself is a whole nother world. I've got an interesting interview coming up next week with one of the brightest minds in the space to talk all things NFTs. Well, he's actually more of a metaverse expert and DeFi expert. NFTs are another area as well. So that'll be an interesting interview there to talk about the future of that space. He runs a hedge fund. They're investing in those technologies. So where are the opportunities? How do you 10X? How do you 100X? Follow the money, number one, right? The money always has the loudest voice. Capital has the loudest voice. Where is the money flowing? Where is the talent flowing? and where are the end users going. So those are the three things that you want to watch in terms of what to invest in, where you can get those big 10x returns, 100x returns in those projects. You also want to make sure that you're using exchanges that are safe, that you believe in, that you're not going to, that aren't going to get hacked, and you're not going to lose your investment. Those types of things. So those are the things that I'm looking at in terms of when the market heats up again, and waiting for this little cycle to work itself out, to get some economic clarity from the Fed, and from the world events that are going on in terms of conflict around the world. I'm waiting for some of those things to kind of settle in a little bit to decide where to deploy on this next cycle. And there are going to be some really good opportunities out there. So that's how I look at things. That's how I look at the value of things. That's where I look at opportunities. And again, I'm not saying go invest in Axie. I'm just saying that's how I look at them. Who's the user? What kind of revenue is it generating? How much capital is flowing into that project, that company? Where is the talent? Who's leading the company? What kind of talent's flowing into them? So those are some of the things that I use to look at these. The same thing and same way I look at a company that I'm looking to invest in, or a real estate opportunity that I'm looking at. The same principles apply, right? What's the capital look like, flowing into those assets? What do the talent and team look like? What are the opportunities? What's the potential that it could reach ultimately? And what's the worst case scenario where it could go if I'm wrong? And I always want to know, how am I wrong? That's what I look for more than anything else. I want to know, where am I wrong? What am I missing? How am I going to get tripped up? How can I get hurt? And then I want to understand the cost of that mistake and make sure that I can withstand that hit if and when it happens. And then I want to always have the upside. And, obviously that's great if we get there, but oftentimes things don't always work out the way we hope they do. So you want to make sure that you can withstand the hit when they don't, recover and rebound. So those are a little bit of my thoughts for today. I hope you're doing well. I hope this video helps you, and I will see you on the next video.